Welcome to another episode of the Ultimate Intimacy Podcast. It's Friday. We got on our good friend Austin. So, welcome back for another episode, Austin.
Thank
Amy
you.
picked a fantastic subject today. We get a lot of you emailing us, messaging us through social media, and asking us about certain topics or questions. And I think this is a subject we've had a bunch of people messaging about lately, if I'm not mistaken, right, babe?
It's, I don't want to say like exact questions, but just the topic today is going to be why just talking about fixing your sexual intimacy in your marriage just doesn't just automatically make it better. Because like we always say, go talk about it, go talk about it. You have to communicate, you have to talk about it. Go talk about your sex life, and that means emotional, all the areas of intimacy, right? But you can go talk about something over and over and over again, and that just doesn't change. It doesn't always just change it, right? Like if you're not having healthy conversations, deep conversations, vulnerable, and the other person actually listening and caring, and you got to be having like really talking about it, and then you have to make change, right?
Right.
So
Well, I
Yeah.
think I think talking about it is kind of the number one step, right? But maybe there's step two and step three of like implementing, as Austin always says in so many podcasts, that people learn all this information, but they don't know how to apply it. And I think this is one of those subjects to where you talk about it and you're like, okay, we understand this is the case or this is the
mhm.
issue, but then how do we have the tools or how do we actually implement a solution for it?
Well, I'm just going to throw out really quick before we jump in. We have this conversation all the time in our marriage. Like, you have the high, Nick has the higher libido, I have the zero libido. We're always like having that discussion on your feelings, my feelings, the why, the behind it, like just
What
so many deep things. We talk about it all the time. Like this is obviously is not a conversation that's hard for us, but sometimes I feel like that wheel spins. We have that conversation 2 weeks later, we have it again.
yeah, like
Like you
for
always want sex, like I am on the mood. Like those conversations can happen and happen and happen, and just because we talk about it doesn't always fix it.
what? Sorry, Austin,
Yeah,
we're
you're good.
taking a little bit of time, but what I love about this podcast, and I truly do, is like we are seriously like airing the things that we even struggle with as a couple, right? Like I would say, Amy and I have a great marriage,
Mhm.
and I think sometimes people write in and say, "Oh my heck, you guys just act like you have the perfect marriage." No, we don't. Like we sit here on this podcast and we air our dirty laundry, so to speak, and say, we do have a good marriage, but just like almost every one of you out there, we still like have these discussions. We still have things that we need to talk about or figure out. And that's the whole purpose of doing this podcast is to say, hey, we know you're struggling with these things. We also have struggled with these things. Here's what works, here's what hasn't. We have Austin on the, to from a therapeutical side to say, hey, I've been trained in this. Here's what couples can do. So I guess I just want to say I love that we like instead of just sitting here talking like we know everything because we don't, it's fun to be able to actually say this is something that we struggle with and we're still trying to find solutions to certain things too.
Well, every time I hear that, just talking about it doesn't make it better. I'm like, no, I absolutely agree with that because we talk about this all the time. Obviously, we've gotten really good at talking about it in our marriage and on the podcast. That doesn't always fix the things that we're going through. So,
Yeah.
yeah, let's deep dive that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, right, I have to come from, I guess, two places simultaneously. One is, right, therapeutically, right? And one is as a married man, right? And there's a real balance, or maybe the right word here is there's typically this divide between, let's call it theory and practice, right? And so therapeutically, like I became a therapist primarily looking at myself and our marriage. And I was learning all this theory and all this stuff. And I was like, hey, cool, let's implement. And I was like, well, the theory isn't translating to what the theory proposed, right? And I'm like literally like trying this in our marriage with myself. And so, over time, I've come to this place where it's like we've been married almost 20 years, and I've been a therapist 15 of those years, right? And I'm looking at the difference between, hey, here's what we can talk about in therapy, and then how does it translate at home for other people? Same thing in my own relationship. And so, this is what I found. There's a couple underlying pieces that I would say, if those are in place, the talking about it starts to shift where it's progressive, and I guess maybe I'll just start kind of at the foundation, if that's all right,
Yeah,
of my
absolutely.
thoughts on this. And so, I think the core component that I look at often around sexuality is one, we're not trained how to be sexual beings or how to manage sexuality. We talk about this at times, right? Where we just have this sexuality feeling, and very few like places talk about sexuality as part of like developmental progression,
Hmm.
especially in a spiritual context. And so I think that's one challenge is for most couples. It's like you date each other and you feel attraction, you feel excitement, and typically sexuality is a desire for both. It's not always born out of love, though, right? It's born out of attraction and desire, and you're meeting some need that I didn't know I had, but I feel better with you, so I naturally start to feel more sexual. And then couples get into, let's call it quote unquote real life, and those desires aren't always there. Even the feeling of love isn't always present for couples, right? It's like, I love you, but today I don't like you, right? It's like, okay, what does that mean, right? And so I think one of the healthiest things when we're looking at like talking about it doesn't always repair it. And if our goal is like, how do we really create this healthy thing? My first advice is we need to look at what's the practice of developing individually your own sexuality, right? So we don't actually have a libido part of us. That's not like a body part, right? It's this
Right.
abstract
Yeah.
idea of like my
Mhm.
libido, high drive, low drive. That's connected to a variety of things. That's
Sure.
biology, that's physiology, that's, emotional, that's beliefs, all this type of stuff is tied to sexuality. And so, for anybody that's in a relationship, or honestly not, being able to go, how do I like look at my own sexuality? Why do I have desire when I have desire? What attracts me to be sexual? What doesn't, right? And like understanding that about ourselves, I think is really valuable. And then this is what I think a lot of people struggle with is how do I grow in my own sexuality? So for some people, that might be how do I tame it, right? We've
Hmm.
talked about this
Yeah.
before. For other people, it's like, how come I'm never feeling sexual? That might be something internally for me. That might be something, that I need to talk to a doctor about. That might be my whole relational context isn't working where desire is there. I hear this quite often from couples where people say, I do have sexual desire. I don't have it for my partner. Okay, that's challenging. That means I'm still feeling like a sexual being, but we don't have enough of a bond,
Yeah.
right? And so this is why talking about it doesn't it doesn't always work.
Yeah.
Is
Exactly.
people are just coming to each other with desire. It's like, hey, I have an unmet need. Can you meet it? And it's like, well, what can you do in the relationship that meets another need that allows a person to feel cared for, loved, maybe in non-sexual ways, right? We talk about this all the time too. And so the place where I would go with this as a couple is how do we as a couple take the time out of our lives, maybe once a week, maybe every couple days, where I get in tune with my own like sexuality and I start to ask myself like, am I wanting to be sexual today like just because my body is saying so? Is it because I actually feel connected? Is it because I feel disconnected, right? And like start to get in tune with that. And then I think when you have the conversations, you can start to ask yourself, is my partner responsible for calming my anxiety? Is that why we have sex in our relationship? Is every time I'm anxious, you calm me sexually? Maybe, maybe not. But let's at least know what's what's happening, right? And so in a sex therapy context or a couples therapy context, we can slow that down and like help people start to understand that, which I think doesn't happen kind of anywhere else that I know of, to be honest. And so the place I would look at, I think I was doing this deep dive study the other day of some English words in the scriptures, and I was like trying to figure out what's like the original, like actual meaning. And I took the word knowledge, like Adam knew Eve, right? What like we often think like that's just sexual. And so the word knowledge or know in the Bible, it's actually there's three different words where knowledge is put in the place of it from like the Hebrew and the Greek or whatever. And I'll be quick with this, okay? But this is valuable when we come to sexuality because there's the knowledge of like I know about the thing. Okay, I know about sex. Okay. There's the understanding. I understand how sex works in our marriage. And then there's what we'd call the experiential knowledge. Okay. Talking about it are these two things. I just flipped everybody off almost. Sorry. Um, this knowing is through interaction and experience. And so most couples know, I mean, truly how sexuality works between them. I heard this last week from a couple. They're like, when we're on track, we do this really well, pretty easily. And they're like, but we don't know why we keep getting off track. It's like, right. So let's start to understand, like you guys are talking about. Couples talk about it. 2 weeks later, we're talking about it again. Same thoughts, same description, same, right? And so I often tell couples we need to maybe resolve some things internally between the two of you. We might have to help each of you kind of develop your own sexuality, which when we expand that, it's not just, even for men, it's not just physical. It's very emotional for men. We pretend it's not. But if it weren't emotional for men, you wouldn't feel angry when you're rejected. Anger is an emotion, right? You wouldn't feel rejected if,
Yeah.
these are emotional states of being, right? And so we need to start to understand what emotions are connected to sexuality, both positive and negative, and how can I strip some of that away from it so sexuality is just it's this beautiful thing between us and we have enough of all the other good stuff that even if sex isn't there, I'm not feeling unloved, rejected, worthless. It's like I know you love me. I know you care for me. You're feeling it too. Now we can go to sex and enjoy it, or we don't have sex and we're still enjoying it. Like it's there and it's not there, and it's there and it's not there. That's hard for a lot of couples to get to. And that's why people get exhausted and they burn out. And then we see sexless marriages. It's like we talked about it, we talked about it, we talked about it, and we never like resolved it. And so, one practice I often encourage couples is not just with sexuality, but your whole relationship. Like, it is a living, breathing organism. Like, compare it to like a plant or a tree. It's always going to need water. It's always going to need oxygen. It's always going to need, right? Like a plant would need. Marriages don't tend to work well without emotional intimacy, spiritual intimacy, sexual intimacy. We talk about this stuff, right? And so the challenge is a lot of couples are stuck in this like, hey, we understand each other, but it's not deepening into like, let's call it like integrated as a part of me, a part of you. And then we create kind of, let's call it a life system where this works because it's exhausting. Like I remember times where me and my wife, it's like we would have like a 2 hour discussion and we neither one would feel resolved. We both feel hurt about it. And my head was always like, we could have just had like sex for like 45 minutes or half hour or whatever instead of this 2 hour discussion. That seemed much easier, right? But that wasn't what was happening for her. It wasn't easier to just go in there again and again, right? And so coming to this place for each couple, this idea of let's learn or create together what works for us. I don't encourage like a long term, like, okay, this is how we're going to do it forever. And I don't care how your feelings are. I would build in probably a weekly check in. How are you doing? How are you feeling this week? Let's look at what's coming up and let's just be realistic with, capacity, right? And I think nobody really wants their spouse to typically just show up and not be checked into it. Like here and there's fine, have a quickie and all that kind of thing. But like most people are, hey, I'm willing to wait so we can like have an experience, not just an orgasm. Do you guys see that with people writing in,
Think
right?
men are willing to wait for that.
I think they can be. Let's talk about how long the wait is, right?
Yeah,
That's what
exactly.
most men would say, right? Right. So, well, I think this is the thing. This is the trick I think I see with couples and I've seen in my own marriage. Like, I may have worded this, but it's worth repeating. I remember working with a couple where the woman kind of woke up in the night with like high desire, like a desire she'd not felt before. And she was like, this isn't like intense. And long story short, the husband was like, that's me, like kind of always, right? And that's very common for men is like, hey, I have this desire. I'm still functioning. I'm doing work. I'm doing like I'm managing this desire thing all the time. And I think what can happen for women is they actually can feel similar to the emotional connection piece, but women often have places where they can get that met outside of just the marriage, in a variety of ways, right?
Yeah, we
And
talked about.
so women, even if they're starving for connection in the marriage, they're typically not completely starving.
Yeah,
Whereas, right, men, if the hunger is for that intimacy connection, we don't want them to go anywhere else to get that need met, right? So this is where I think each couple has to come to this place of how do we have healthy intimacy, not okay, I'll be sexual so you don't look at porn or so you don't cheat on me. That's not healthy either. Okay. But this is where I think this understanding, like on an emotional level, like I get you. I see how you work. I see that we're different. You seem to get me also. This is what we both need to feel joy in this marriage, and it's typically not the same. And then each of you being able to look and go, are you regularly meeting my needs? Yes. Am I regularly meeting your needs? Yes. Are they the same? Probably not, right? A lot of women don't love that sex seems like the only need for men. I mean, I don't think it is, but a lot of couples, men included, would say, like, I kind of feel like that's kind of all I really need. A lot of women really struggle with that. And I think,
So why do you think that is? I think because, and Amy and I talk about this, and I know, obviously we do polls and everything like that. And I think we did one poll and we asked the husbands, is sex more emotional for you? And I don't remember the exact number, but the response was overwhelmingly like sex is more about like an emotional connection versus
right,
a physical connection. And I think too, and one of the great things that we really try to help couples, and that's why we have our Let's Talk About Sex card decks, and Amy and I are always encouraging talking about it. But I think understanding each other, right? Because if I can better understand what sex means to Amy, and she can understand what it means to me and between the marriage, because I think so many women just say, oh, we just want sex, right? And if that were the case, a husband would go take care of himself and he would never need it. He would never need to connect with his wife in that way. But that's not the case. I think, as you've alluded a lot of times, it's such an emotional thing for a husband and their self-confidence, self-worth, their desire in work and just driven in life in every capacity, basically aligns with the desire from their wife. And so I
right.
think, anyways, what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, it's interesting because all the research shows that men feel the most emotionally connected through sexuality, right? And if that piece isn't there, it doesn't kind of matter how deep the emotional bond is. Like men aren't really looking for like just my best friend that I can bond with emotionally and spiritually. It's like I want a partner, right? A romantic partner. A lot of times women can feel that deep bond through emotional and spiritual and be okay without the sexual, or commonly what we hear is not very frequently. Once a week, once a month, I'm pretty okay. And so I think that's where again this understanding, not just like cognitively, but like can I empathize with what it feels like to not feel fulfilled unless sexuality is there, right? And so being able to go, do I feel fulfilled in our marriage? And clearly not every woman does or every low desire partner does. Again, we're talking kind
So,
of, high desire male, low desire female, but we know that that can change. But right, being able to ask yourself, like, if I could only connect to this degree and never kind of feel the fulfillment, what would that be like? It'd be painful, right? Same thing on the flip side, right? High desire person going, what would it be like to enter into sexuality again and again and again with not feeling the same way I do? This is genuine understanding, not we talked about it again, I get it, and it goes away, and then right? It's I got to integrate this knowledge. Do I really care about my partner's satisfaction, well-being? Do I have a value as a spouse that I want us to have a happy marriage and I want my spouse to feel, loved and cared for and connected? again and again. And I think this is where the development has to be careful because it can get, let's call it overboard, where a guy's like, well, I only feel loved if you have sex with me twice a day. Well, there probably needs to be some growth work there that you're not
Exactly.
holding,
That's not
right?
realistic,
Or
right?
once a day, sorry.
Yeah.
Right. So this is where, I mean, this is where sexuality is so tricky. Trauma is often connected to sexuality. Developmental needs are often wrapped into sexuality because they didn't get met as a kid, and sexuality is powerful. There's a lot to this. Like I remember early, and I may have mentioned this on the podcast before, but early in my career, I remember meeting with a guy and like what equaled love was sex 7 times a day. And I said, you're not going to find someone like that's going to have sex with you. I don't think you're going to find that in your whole life, right? And so if that's the only thing that equals love, we need to understand what that's about, right?
That's
And
trauma.
that was some kind of cognitive emotional thing that was a meaning behind it, right? And so one of the things I tell high desire partners all the time is we need to expand what feels like love to you. If you're only feeling loved in sexual intimacy, like how can you feel it in these other ways that your spouse is showing love? Because I hear this all the time from low desire partners. I'm showing love all the time in all these other meaningful ways. And so I think when couples come in for like sex therapy or just even regular couples therapy, I often tell them don't talk about it outside of our meeting. We'll talk about it. We'll work through what we work through. You guys will leave with kind of a plan for the next week and then try to implement it. And let's notice where it's challenging. Then we'll readdress it. It's meant to be a progression to where the goal isn't they're just forever coping with the same
Mhm.
spinning hamster wheel. It's we understand how this works well for us and how it doesn't. And then we both typically need to adjust. And then ideally, we kind of have a system. Like we kind of know how this works. And we know that right or wrong, if we're not intimate for X amount of days, the high desire partner is going to feel this way and that way and this way. And they might either get more snappy or they might pull out. Like, right, it ebbs and flows with each couple. But understanding the pattern, like, this is probably how it's going to be. So let's start to have this awareness. Same thing for the low desire partner, right? Like, I have compassion. I'm not a low desire partner. Okay. I have compassion though, because low desire partners, there's such an emphasis on sexuality. A lot of times, low desire partners are like, why isn't my love good enough if I'm not sexual with you? I'm showing love in all these other ways that doesn't count, is what I hear. And it's tricky because a lot of times low desire partners are also going out without their marital needs met, and the focus is often on sexuality. And so when couples call me and they call about sex, which they don't always call about sex, but often it comes up somewhere in there if they're struggling, right? One of the things I'm careful about is even if you're calling about sex, I let them know we got to figure out the whole thing.
Yeah, you gotta look
Like
at the whole
just making
map.
sex work doesn't mean the whole marriage is working. It might for one. Like I've met with couples. I have actually a close friend, and he he says he's like my wife never turned me down. Like our whole marriage for I don't know 25 years or whatever. She never turned me down. And he said, but I was still like looking at pornography in addition to that. And right, that betrayal was massive for her because
Oh,
she's
yeah.
like, I was always available. I was always here. And again, it's not justifiable if she's not showing up. It is more understandable that there's a struggle there, right? But anyway, so he said like she was always showing up. I was still struggling too. And then what she would say is, I was showing up fully and I don't feel you like you were in the other ways, right? This happens all the time. And so when couples come in and they go, hey, we just need to have more better sex, I'm aware more better sex does not typically fix the relationship, right? Sexuality is not the core piece. It often gets emphasized as a core piece, but love and a bond that oftentimes couples don't know how to create is the core.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it
Which,
shows up in so many other ways.
right, right. And so that would be one thing I would tell couples like in a non-therapeutic context or a therapeutic context. I would say Okay, you're trying to figure out your sexuality, decide how often you're going to talk about it. And then what are we going to do from here? And notice it might be incremental adjustments, because if you're each lacking development, it's going to be a real struggle to be like, hey, let's just be different. It's like, if I can't lift 200 pounds, I can't lift 200 pounds. I
Yeah.
might only be able to lift 70. And, in 2 months, I can lift 80. And in 3 months, right? And we have to be aware of capacity. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
great analogy. Yeah, I love that.
it's good.
So, one other thought is the discussion component for couples often doesn't resolve. What often happens is they go in a loop, right? And they say the same things, hoping to be understood in a different way. And it, like, typically both people leave without really feeling understood. And so, I might have referenced this before, but this is a skill set that is worth development. Stephen Covey talks about first seek to understand, then to be understood. And if we go back to what I said earlier, this isn't just cognitive, like, oh, I get it. It's like, I need to emotionally understand what this is like for you. Sue Johnson, in one of her books for therapists, she says the way that couples heal where there's been wounds, where there's been damage to a relationship, it's like when I see that my pain causes you pain because you actually get what I felt like, that's where like a repair bond is created. That is, in simple terms, what we call empathy. It's like I feel what you feel, and now I get you. And if I, relate this to Christ, okay, he descended below all things. That's a type of intimacy that's hard to compete with. It's like I understand you, not because I read about you in a book. It's because I felt what you felt. I went through what you went through. This is why people bond so deeply actually in struggle. Like you look at like wartime type, it's like we were in the same thing. I get you. That's a hard bond to
Yeah, it's
break.
so true.
Right.
So true.
When couples can sink into that together, and this is what we do in couples therapy, whether it's sexuality or not, we help couples sink into the real feeling. It's like, oh, can you feel what your partner's feeling? People pop out of that because it's uncomfortable. And
Mm.
we sink them back into that. It's like, hold on, what happens here? Oh, you go into shame. Oh, you go into right. It's like, we want to help you sit in this place together. And sometimes that's mourning the past. Sometimes that's apologizing. Sometimes that's like, I didn't know that you felt that way when I don't prioritize intimacy.
Hmm.
Well, I didn't know that you feel that way when I'm pressuring you because I don't mean to pressure you. Like that understanding, that's where shifts happen internally. And that starts to lock in for couples. And then you start to operate from more, let's call it love and empathy and compassion and care. And you're like, oh, I don't want my partner to feel that way today. I can, clear my mind and I can show up, and or I can calm myself down and distract myself and wait a day or two or three or whatever it needs to be, right? Like that capacity to have self-mastery, I don't think is happening a lot in our society anymore,
Yeah.
right? It's kind of this like be whoever you are. And I think there's a dual nature. I think we have a spiritual nature, and I think we have our biology, our DNA, our upbringing, trauma, attachment, like
Oh, so many things
nervous
to play.
system, right? And so I think the message of the world right now is like be this version of you that, everything's acceptable. And it's hard in a marriage to accept someone that's not being their best self consistently to you, right? And so I often again tell couples like let's look at some self-mastery. Let's, instead of making your partner the heal all for all of your emotions, like there's a place for co-regulation. There's also developing this ability for self-regulation where it's like, okay, we had sex twice last week. It's been 5 days. I'm feeling dysregulated. Do I need them to regulate me? Or can I self-soothe and go, I know I'm loved. It's a busy week. I know they're stressed. How do I come and show love in the stress? and be loving. Like, you're stressed out, you're having a hard time, you're busy. Last week was great. Yeah, I'd love this week to be the same, but I can show compassion that you're not there. You can still bond. You can still feel close and connected. Weeks where there's great sex, weeks where there's not. Does that make sense?
Oh
And
yeah.
I'll be really transparent. Like, like this has been the hardest struggle of my marriage too, for sure. Right? Like, how do we find this balance? We both came with a lot of trauma that neither one of us knew played into that, but it certainly has. And untangling that is not an easy thing for most couples, honestly. So,
Well, I think you have unhealthy couples that are obviously dealing with this, and there's a lot of reasons behind that from you know, things that are more causing that. And then you have healthy couples that are also struggling with this issue.
right, right,
So I think it's something that encompasses, I think, we do polls and everything, and I think the majority of marriages have a high desire spouse and a low desire spouse.
yeah,
So it's I would say a 95% issue, right? I think we did a poll and it was only like 3 or 4% of couples that said, yeah, we're very balanced as far as that goes. And then
right,
everyone else was a high desire, low desire. Even in healthy marriages, it's going back to kind of what you said, Amy. Amy and I have some friends and talking about empathy and trying to understand each other. I think that's really, really important on both sides, trying to understand how each other feel. We have some friends and we've tried to have them on the podcast, just hasn't worked out yet, but they were sharing the experience where, the husband's the high drive and the wife had absolutely no drive. And she went and got, hormone therapy or whatever, and all of a sudden she turned into the high drive.
mm,
And the husband, is jokingly saying, I was curled up in a ball on the side of the room saying, not tonight, honey, not tonight.
right,
And her response was, I never imagined this is what it feels like for him.
right.
And she says, because of that, I will never deny him again. And
That's not what actually, of course, she's not never going to deny
well, I know,
it.
but that was her
There's more
comment.
understanding though, right? Yeah,
Yeah, I think the point she was trying to make is she never truly understood what his high drive looked like until she experienced it.
right,
Most couples are not going to have that experience, but the point I'm trying to make is she's like, oh my heck, I never imagined this is how you felt. And now that I'm the one feeling this, is like this is crazy. I can now understand how you feel.
And vice versa.
And vice versa. And so that's all I'm trying to say is when you were talking about the empathy part or trying to understand how each other feel, I think that's a crucial element as well too. Is and men and women are or I should say high drive, low drive, because sometimes it's the women that have the higher drive. High drive, low drive. If couples can at least try to, I'm never going to understand how low drive desire spouse feels, and they
Maybe
may,
one day.
yeah, maybe I will one day, and
right.
vice versa. But if we can talk about it and help,
Not talk about it.
well,
Figure it
but
out.
I think you have to talk about it first, but then say how do we figure out or how to find this balance? Because I do think with society as well too, and you kind of hit on this is it's come to a point to where it used to be that like foreplay actually mattered, right? Like when a wife would say, you know what, I'm not really in the mood, but I'm willing to get in the mood. And now it seems like just in the world that like, oh, if you're not in the mood, you shouldn't have to give in, or like the world just twists so many things that I think is making intimacy between a couple a lot more confusing, or what used to work no longer works, or we get just kind of a distorted view of uh,
Right.
what sexual intimacy is between a couple that I think confuses some people as well too.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time about thinking about sexuality in the context of like spirituality, and I believe it is part of our development as a human. Like, I have this sexuality that turns on in, let's call it mid-teen years, right? Somewhere in there. And we have very little training for like, what do you do with this, right? I mean, I'm raising a 15-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter, and I'm thinking about this with all the couples I've ever worked with. I'm like, every single couple I've ever worked with has struggled with sexuality, even if they're not coming for that, right? It's like this thing is hard to find this balance, and very rarely do couples have it like, we just figured it out and it works forever. It's always this ebb and flow.
Yeah.
And I think not just sexuality, but I think bringing male and female together, like it kind of refines us if we let it. Like it requires parts of me, selfishness, parts of me, like to I have to overcome those. I have to let those parts of me go. Same thing on the flip side, where we become better versions of ourselves and we become more loving, more empathetic, more thoughtful, more caring, less distracted, less, right, selfish, all these things. And I think over time, couples come to this place where like through struggle, we became better versions of ourselves, or we didn't. We tore this relationship apart with, anger and whatever, right? These things that happen. And so for any of the couples struggling with sexuality, like I like on a on a understanding, not from being a clinician level, like I get the pain of feeling rejected, of I get the pain also of putting too much pressure on my spouse and creating a lot of damage where she didn't feel good enough. She didn't feel that no matter what she did, it was enough. Like a lot of pain around sexuality for couples. And I think our hope, right, with this podcast and some of the things we're working on is like, let's restore what God intended with sexuality. It's meant to be beautiful. It's meant to be connecting. Um, in past generations, and we have to deal with where we are, but past generations, I remember Esther Perel, who's a very renowned sex therapist, couples therapist, she said, your ancestors were not having as much sex as you are. If you're living in the 21st century, your ancestors that lived pre-birth control, like it was babies, like was, and they didn't understand, like, not understand, but like you didn't always know how to figure out your cycle and timing. And so it was like, do we want to risk having a baby? Yes, sure. Okay, right. And so there was probably much more culturally around self-mastery and these types of things that we don't typically talk a lot about outside of religious cultures. Or you see this sexuality as anything goes now. And it's unfortunate because a lot of people are not, I mean, they're not learning how to connect and fall in love before they're kind of
Yeah, almost
short-cutting
like
it.
yeah,
Right,
a lot of
right.
people sexual first and then
Yeah. Well, and that's, I think, this is where I've said this before, like whenever I do like traditional sex therapy, we always start with emotional intimacy. And it can be emotional intimacy, exactly what we're talking about, understanding each other's emotions around sexuality. This is what it feels like for me in our relationship around sexuality. I feel pressured all the time. I feel like it's never enough. Okay, let's go deeper than that feeling. What's the emotion? I feel anxiety. I feel this, I see the hairs from low desire. I feel this anxiety. Like we just had intimacy. The next day, I'm already feeling anxious that you're going to want it again. You're going to be kind of, your mood's going to be dependent on that. If a high desire person understands, oh, you're feeling anxious all the time because I'm putting pressure on you when I think I'm trying to show you love, that might be the intention of the high desire. Like, I want to show you love. I want to feel love with you. The impact isn't translating. My high desire to be with you, isn't equaling peace and love for you. It's actually equaling pressure, anxiety, not good enough. How do we adjust that? How do I help you feel, less pressure, less stress, less that you have to manage my emotional mood through sexuality when you're not feeling it, right? Same thing on the flip side. And this is the beauty of I would call it good therapy, is you start to understand each other and you feel each other's feelings, not just you understand what each other's saying and then you forget it. And this is a real common struggle. Couples hear it, they make good intentions to change, and then they don't. And so a lot of times I'm helping couples like, let me help you create a system where like life works, not just sexuality, but emotions, date night, parenting, like most of us, I would say, I don't know, probably 99.9% of people don't come into marriage like trained on
oh
how
yeah.
do we figure this thing out, right? It's like we're all stumbling in the dark. But when I became a therapist, kind of going back to where we started, it's like, oh, there's people that research this, there's people that think about it. I found that a lot of theory didn't translate, at least into our marriage and into a lot of others. And so over time, um, I think I think two things. I think I'm a fairly determined man, but also I know it's possible, right? Like I know it's possible for a husband and wife. I it's part of me, and so it was like I'm gonna keep trying to figure out how do we create the tools and the systems and the interactions that help us see and understand each other? So that's available for couples. I think God is the best guide of that, right? If husband and wife will go to prayer together and separately and say, hey, help me see some things different, help me understand. And I hear this from couples, so it's pretty cool. I hear this from couples, like worked with a couple weeks ago, and the wife was like, she was like, I was in kind of like a meditative prayer state, and she's like, I felt like I had this like awareness of like who my husband really is at his core, and I like stopped feeling this criticism towards him and this judgment, and I saw like his good heart, and I saw that when I'm loving and caring towards him, like he kind of rises up into a better version of him. And I think that's the goal of marriage, is like, let's help each other become better and better, including how do we enjoy, sexuality at a higher level where we're not having 2 hour discussions every week,
Mhm.
that we both leave feeling unseen and unheard. Instead, how do we understand one another and then we both leave the bedroom, whether we started out wanting to go there with desire or not, we both leave feeling loved and cared for. And that's, I think, something that's unique, is when couples are being sexual, not because desire. They're being sexual because of love. Those are different emotions.
Yeah.
Desire is desire, love is love. And so it's interesting when I meet with like couples, when they get to a place where it's like, we weren't sexual because we needed it. We weren't sexual because our biology was telling us it was desire time. It was, we love each other. And so we wanted to express our love as a gift of self. Um, Desire didn't come into the picture because we were having, there was no place for desire yet. Does that make sense? They
Yeah.
weren't without.
Well,
So
I think this is a great episode because the episode we just did was talking about love and kind of how to know if you are a couple that's truly in love, I guess. And obviously, as you go listen to that podcast, you'll identify, shaking your head like, yeah, we have this in our relationship or we don't have this in our relationship. But as you're hitting on love and sexual intimacy being an expression of love, I think this correlates well with that episode. So if you haven't listened to that episode, that's the one I think just before this as well. So
I like what you said about emotional. I think sex is more deeply tied to emotional things, and I think we need to self figure out, self dive
yeah,
into what sex, why we need it so much, why we don't need it so much, all the emotions behind it, if it's a nurturing, like just all the emotions you stated behind it. I think that's really, really important because until you figure out why your drive is so high or why your drive is so low and all the emotions that are running behind it and tied to it, I don't feel like just talking about sex all the time is really going to solve anything.
yeah.
So I'm glad that you talked
Yeah.
about
I think what one of the big things we're missing, and I won't suggest that I completely know how to resolve this, but I think that, I mean, I've thought about it a lot based on my work and different contexts there, but like we need like a sexual development kind of program for couples. And that isn't like, how do I become more sexual? It's like, what is my sexuality and how do I like get in tune with it? Kind of like a practice of, oh, what do I feel? What don't I feel? What do I do with it? And so it probably would look, for one partner, it's my development is I'm in control. My development is it's awakened, right? And now we both have
it. Mhm.
sexuality. How do we share that? And I think if couples went into something like that together, and that's what we do on a smaller scale in
yeah,
in the couples context, right? Is um, being able to understand self, understand the other, and again, that knowingness that's not just informational, it's like we're interacting at a deeper level. And when couples feel that together, that bond allows for that to carry on. I remember my wife would explain things and it's like, I get it, I get it. Well, a later time came where I'm like, oh, I get it now. I see what this is like for you. That shifted and it changed a lot of things for me, where my perception was you're just rejecting me because I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. That had nothing to do with it for her. That was what my emotions were telling me, but she didn't even feel like she was rejecting me. She thought she was stepping up to the plate way more because she loved me so much, because her desire was here. And so if she's having sex with me, whatever, 3 times a week, it's like, it's not because I need sex, it's because I love you so much. And I'm reading it as, you don't love me enough. Like once we had that understanding, I was able to disconnect, like, oh, when I want to be with you and you don't, that has nothing to do with you love me or not. I got that up here first. I needed to do some healing work in here because it felt different than my understanding. We can talk about how you do that
Another
work.
rejection podcast.
Right. It's not easy work to do, but I think that's the place we want to go, is like helping people have the actual tools and skill sets and kind of how do we shift this stuff where we can heal, where we can grow.
We're gonna add that to the list.
Cool. Good.
There's a lot to talk about. I mean, we have tons of things to say, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, we talk about it all the time. We take polls, we get answers.
It's
Every message we get is high desire and low desire, and the high desire saying, what do I do?
But it's always tied to emotions. It's always
Yeah.
tied to other stuff. So it's
Right.
Yeah,
good point.
it
Good
is.
point.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, absolutely is. Yep.
I think that's what's beautiful about this podcast is I've done this research in several different ways, but most recently I went to an AI I've been training that it's kind of like a research AI. I said, I want you to like scour all the content that you have availability. And I said, can you find a group of people throughout history that like figured out marriage, like figured out sexuality? And it said it hasn't been done. I was like, I'm not surprised, right?
Okay, then that's what our goal is.
I think that is part of what the this ongoing community, like, let's figure it out.
Well, and the great thing is
it's still something we haven't figured out in our own marriage. So,
but that's the thing is like it doesn't matter, just like we talk about with ultimate intimacy, like you don't get to ultimate intimacy and maintain ultimate intimacy forever. It's a roller coaster, right? But the goal is, whether it's ultimate intimacy, emotional intimacy, sexual intimacy, the goal is to create healthy habits and things, knowing that you're not going to achieve that all the time. You might only achieve that every once in a while, but that's achieving it once in a while is far better than never achieving it at all, or sitting, at the end of the roller coaster where it's flattening out the whole time, right?
Right.
Like every marriage is going to go through different things where it's up and down, but having the healthy tools and everything, when the times are down, obviously the tools and everything, all the work you've done in your marriage is going to sustain you and get you back up to where you want to be. And so, I think it's just, it's going to be a work for every single human alive, to try to have a better marriage relationship, things like that.
I think that's where like part of my hope is to inspire couples to go, hey, each couple can do this, right? You can create a healthy marriage, including healthy intimacy in all the ways. I think if one couple gets it and starts to share it and goes, hey, here's what we're figuring out, here's what works. Like my hope is that people can have hope of like, oh, relationships really can work really well and they can stay that way throughout all of life's ebbs and flows,
Different
right?
seasons,
Life's going to happen, right? It doesn't mean you won't face hard times together, but that doesn't have to divide you. It's like, yeah, it's hard right now, and intimacy is not working right now. We still have love, we still have connection, we're still, close in maybe non-sexual ways right now, but we're still intimate. It's that seeingness that so many couples don't even do in sexuality, to be honest. We've talked about this as well. Like I would say most people's sexual interactions are not actually intimate. I would guess probably 90% of sexual interactions do not leave the two people feeling closer and more loved by the other, which is
crazy.
Unfortunate. So,
well, we got a lot more to talk about in future episodes as well. And hopefully all of you enjoyed the podcast. I mean, again, this is such an important topic that I think almost every couple out there at one point or another has dealt with. Like I said, I've been very open about it, that this is sometimes something we struggle with in our own relationship. It doesn't mean our relationship's horrible. It just means that we all have different things that we continuously try to work through to find ultimate intimacy in the relationship. So thank you all for listening. Thank you so much, Austin, for being on the podcast again. We'll look forward to doing some more episodes, and we hope all of you find ultimate intimacy in your relationship as we wrap this up.